Official proclamation by Winnebago County government leaders, April 16th will forever be known as Holocaust Remembrance Day in the city of Rockford. 23 News reporter Alyssa Reamer learns more about the importance of keeping the history of the Holocaust alive and what it means for today's Jewish community who have ties to the event.
Rockford's Midway Village honors the lives of those lost in the Holocaust on Sunday by showing pictures of people in concentration camps and asking the question, how was it humanly possible?
As the mayor of the city of Rockford, do hereby proclaim April 16th, 2023 to be Rockford's Holocaust Remembrance Day.
The Jewish Federation and author Jeffrey Gingold invite the public to come to Rockford's Midway Village Museum Sunday for the annual Holocaust Remembrance and candle lighting, including a visit to the Yom HaShoah Memorial Observance exhibit.
I'm also a second-generation survivor myself. My parents were both Holocaust survivors, and I was born in a displaced persons camp in Germany.
Pekarski says there's many reasons to acknowledge the tragedies that took place between 1933 and 1945.
To remember the people who passed away, or were murdered rather, to watch for signs so that doesn't happen again, to comfort the survivors. And certainly it's a call against hate.
Gingold, the author of Tunnel, Smuggle, Collect, A Holocaust Boy, spends life sharing the experiences of his father and grandparents escaping from the Warsaw Ghetto, which was established by the Nazis in October 1940.
Royalties from it all go to Holocaust education, including speakers' fees.
Gingold says growing up, his family didn't want to bring up their memories of the Holocaust, but his interest sparked when learning about World War II in high school.
I couldn't understand how they survived when most people didn't. And more importantly, how did they escape?
Pekarski says this memorial observance not only shines light on the hate Jewish people receive, but all groups of people from around the world.
Thank you, Alyssa. And according to Holocaust historians, the Warsaw Ghetto housed about 400,000 Jewish people in 1940. But by early 1943, only about 70 to 80,000 survived.